Welcome back, psychologists. I'm your professor, Ryan Keith, and we're here to talk about self-esteem. And by self-esteem, I don't just mean the classic song by punk pop band The Offspring. I'm talking about that thing that your parents and coaches and teachers tried to boost in you with all of the stuff that baby boomers complain about today, like participation trophies and attendance awards and most improved. We know that self-esteem is really important, and social psychologists and educators have known for a long time that there's a connection between self-esteem and success. But what is self-esteem, and why is it so important? You probably already have an idea of what self-esteem is, and pretty much it can be summed up as how good do you feel about yourself? Generally, it's how much of a success or failure do you feel like you are. But there's a lot more to this story, and how exactly we end up with a good sense of self-esteem overall. In social psychology, we examine self-esteem through the lens of what's called the sociometer hypothesis, that much the same way that a thermometer measures what the temperature is, or a barometer measures pressure, a hygrometer measures the amount of humidity in the air, a sociometer measures your social standing, and that it's connected deeply to your sense of overall self-worth. After all, if we step away from the idea of self-esteem and social worth in comparison to others, one of the things we can see is that, well, it's kind of hard to do that stuff. If we say, don't compare yourself to other people, just focus on how good you are, that's kind of tough to do without comparing yourself to other people. If you think about what does it mean to be good at something, I can think about something I'm not good at, like baking a cake, and I know I'm not good at baking a cake because I look at how my cakes turn out compared with how other people's cakes turn out, right? If I think about the kind of cakes that my wife or her mother makes, or the people on the Great British Baking Show, I can't bake anything that doesn't come out of a box with instructions on it. If I think about something that I think I'm pretty good at, like a video game, like Monster Hunter World or Destiny 2, these are things that I love doing, but I absolutely hate playing with other people who are better than me, because as good as I feel like I am, the moment I'm playing competitively with somebody who's better than me, I end up realizing that, in comparison, I'm really not all that great. And it's like my overall sense of worth shifts when I go from playing by myself to playing with other people. I go from being really good to not being really good, even though overall my skill level hasn't changed at all. Or if I think about something that I just want to be the absolute best at, I'll make this argument right now, that if I compared myself to every single person who's watching this video, every person enrolled in one of my classes, I can guarantee, just about 100% guarantee, that I am the absolute best at POGs. P-O-G-S, POGs. You might be able to guess, through your bafflement right now, that the reason I'd be better than everybody else at POGs is that chances are I am the only person who even knows what a POG is. Go ahead and pause the video and look it up. You're going to find pictures of these little paper discs, something tied to an activity from the 90s. It's kind of like collectible stuff before Beanie Babies were a thing, right? What we see there is that in the end, there is no such thing as being good at something or being bad at something. There's just better than other people. In fact, right, whether you want to be a baker or a POG player, or a video game player, or a basketball player, you don't just want to be good. I mean, the one thing that's better than being good is being the best. And all you have to do to be the best is be better than everyone else. That doesn't sound like a whole lot, but what it shows is that you don't have to have any particular level of skill. You just have to be better than other people are. And one way to do that is to just be good at something that nobody else cares about or likes, like POGs. Self-esteem we see then, that sense of self-worth is connected inherently to how other people do, and in a lot of ways is tied to how we compare ourselves to other people. And the social psychology theory of social comparisons theory is all about this. It's all about the idea that we establish our sense of self-worth by comparing ourselves to other people. Social comparisons theory says that we can make two kinds of social comparisons. There are upward social comparisons, in which we compare ourselves to people who are better than us, looking up at them. And we can make downward social comparisons, where we look down at other people who are doing worse than us. Now, we all like to think of ourselves as good people, right? So, of course, we would much rather make upward social comparisons, aspirationally looking at our heroes and the inspirational people around us, than looking down on people and feeling good because of their misfortune. But if we look deep down inside, right, it's pretty clear what impact these have on our self-esteem and what kind of comparisons we like to make. After all, do you like to compare yourself against people who do better than you? at things that you care about, at things that you like. There might be things that you don't really care about that much, and we'll talk about these in a second. Something like a hobby or a skill you haven't really developed, and you don't mind admitting you're not particularly good at these. But take a hobby you really do care about. For me, it would be like playing a video game, and I absolutely hate losing. I hate losing. I hate losing in particular to somebody like my brother, who I'm close to, but he's younger than me, and I should be better than him. And I love winning. And the one thing I love more than winning is the experience that I have, and this happened a couple of times over the last year, where I get to introduce somebody to something that I really like showing my brother the video games Destiny 2 or Monster Hunter World. Because if you think about this, we like to surround ourselves with friends, people we care about and whom we love. But what about those friends? I mean, don't you just love having friends who care about you and support you and who are also just a little bit shorter, a little bit not as attractive as you, or a little bit less skilled in things that you care about? That I can take somebody like my little brother, who's younger than me, and I can introduce him to a video game that I'm already good at. And I can tell him, hey, bud, don't you even worry about it. I can show you all the tricks to be great at this thing. When he struggles at a video game because he's new to it, I can say, don't worry, I got all the good tricks for you. We can extend this too, like, would you rather be the friend in your friend group who's receiving help on your homework or the one who's giving it? Wouldn't you rather be the tutor sharing your expertise than the one who's struggling in math being helped out generously by one of your friends? The experience I had with one of my coworkers when he called me up because his battery died and he didn't know how to use jumper cables. It's all right, I didn't laugh at him, I didn't make fun of him, I just said, hey, but don't you even worry about it, I got you. Look, I got this trick my dad taught me, red to dead, around to ground, hook it up, no problem at all. How did I feel in comparison to him? I was able to make that downward social comparison and say, you know what? He's taller and smarter and better looking than me, but you know what? I know how to jump a car with a dead battery. The time he had a limb from his tree hanging out over his house that needed to be taken down and had no idea what to do about it, don't you even worry, bud. I got me a ladder and a chainsaw. I'll take care of that for you. And even though it took time and effort on my part, I got to demonstrate my expertise and I got to make that downward social comparison. In this way, we see how our self-esteem is a sociometer that helps us establish where we are in the social hierarchy. When we look down at other people, it boosts our self-esteem and we feel better, and that sociometer says, hey, you can feel good about yourself because you are higher up in that hierarchy. When we have to look at people who are above us, when my brother ends up practicing for hours on end and gets better at the video game than I am, the one that I love and I introduced him to, all of a sudden I don't feel like I'm as high up in the hierarchy, I'm lower down. I feel a lot worse. And in this way, this is where we start to see that self-esteem is really important. That because it's tied to our sense of self-worth and our sense of position in the social hierarchy, we will do a lot of stuff to protect that self-esteem. In fact, you may have known, if you experience bullying in your own school experience, you may have heard that bullies have low self-esteem. Turns out this actually isn't the case. Most bullies, in fact, have high self-esteem. It's just that self-esteem is really what we would call unstable. It's not supported by a lot. If you receive a lot of participation trophies, rewards just for showing up, your mom and dad tell you that you're just the smartest and the coolest and the best looking, but that experience isn't supported by anything. You're feeling good about yourself, but that sense of feeling good is constantly threatened. It's not supported by anything substantial. So when you do poorly at something, you show up to school feeling like you're the smartest, but that sense of intelligence isn't supported by any actual successes. And then you do poorly in class compared to other students, and maybe they even make fun of you. That sense of self-worth is easily threatened. You don't think about all of the times you were successful, all of the times that you really did get A's and do well and got awards for your actual merit. You're gonna feel threatened, you're gonna end up feeling pretty badly about yourself, and you're gonna end up seeking a way to help yourself feel better, because that sense of worth and sense of position in the social hierarchy, it's a big risk of going down. And so maybe you're not good at biology or chemistry or spelling. You struggle in class in general, but you know what you are really good at? Beating on nerds, right? So that kid makes you feel bad for getting bad grades. Well, you know what? There's something you can do that they can't do, and that's beat them up. I guess they kind of could beat themselves up, but you're better at that too. So the social comparison theory helps establish that we get our self-esteem by comparing ourselves to others, upward and downward. But there's another theory I want to talk to you guys about, one of my favorites from social psychology, that helps us understand why we do what we do in order to protect our sense of self-esteem. And this is the self-evaluation maintenance model of self-esteem. The self-evaluation maintenance model says that we seek to establish and then maintain our self-evaluation as high as long as 3 criteria are met. Pretty much what it says is that somebody else succeeding at something is going to end up dinging our self-esteem if 3 criteria are met. The 3 criteria are this, and you need to know them, so go ahead and write these down. The 3 criteria are this. You will take a ding to your self-esteem if someone does better than you, and it's something that you care about, and this person is close to you. So think about times that people have done worse than you. That's not going to hurt your self-esteem at all, right? But it also happens that people do better than you at a lot of things. If you watch the Gators play football, for example, I'm going to wager that most of you guys don't yourselves play football with the Gators, right? So even though they play football and they're way better than you end up feeling good about yourself rather than bad. If you've played on a sports team, you've had teammates who've done better than you. So how do you end up feeling good when other people around you do well? Well, a big part of this is that when other people do better than you, but it's something that you don't yourself think of yourself as being good at, it's not something that's really important to your sense of self-worth, and they're way, way, way better than you can engage in something your book talks about as basking in reflected glory. You connect your sense of self-worth to theirs. You're in a group with them. They are part of your in a group. They're part of your team. Even though you're not one of the Gators on the Gators team, right? When they do well, you feel good because somebody in your group did well. This is also why, like, if your preferred politician wins an election, you didn't win the election, but somebody from your group did, and even if you didn't vote, you end up feeling good because somebody in your group won a thing, right? So if somebody does better than you at something you don't really care about, it's not going to hurt you. And if somebody doesn't do particularly well and they don't do better than you, that's definitely not going to hurt you. And if somebody does way, way, way better than you, like maybe you love basketball, but the late, great Kobe Bryant was like one of the best, there's no point comparing yourself to him. So you think of Kobe, you say Kobe as you, this is going to be horrible, right? You say Kobe as you yeet that basketball right up into the end of the hoop, you can feel good about yourself, right? Thinking about somebody that you'd like to be more like. But the self-evaluation maintenance model helps explain something that I think is of real practical importance to a lot of us right now, and that is finding somebody that we want to spend our time and our lives with. When we talk about relationships, one of the things we're going to discuss is that one of the key, most important elements of a successful relationship is similarity. The more similar two people are, the more likely they are to get along and have a high-quality, long-lasting, rewarding relationship. But we want to be similar in the right ways. For example, you want your partner, your husband, your wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, friends, whatever, you want them to have similar interests to you. You don't want it to be the case that they don't share any interests or have similar values. But you also may not want them to be similar in a way that's problematic. For example, I think about an institution that I experienced, that I ran into a lot in graduate school that was actually meant to be helpful and ends up being really harmful. This is something called a trailing spouse policy. The trailing spouse is something that we see emerge out of higher education because when you enter higher education with the goal of becoming a professor, receiving your PhD, and becoming a researcher in something like psychology or sociology or biology or history at a place like UF, you spend a lot of time in school. Even if you shoot straight through, most people are going to be in college until they're 20, 21, 22. You go off to graduate school then, and you may spend 6 or 8 years, meaning that by the time you leave graduate school and start applying for positions, not even the professorship where you're ultimately going to spend the entirety of your career, but like enter postgraduate studies and enter postdoctoral studies, you may be 30 or in your 30s by the time you get there. Which means that a lot of this really important early adulthood where you do things like dating and meeting people that you want to be romantic with and maybe even marry and start a family with, like all of that happens while you're in graduate school. Meaning that chances are the person that you date and fall in love with and ultimately marry has similar values. They are also probably a graduate student, maybe even studying the exact same thing you do. So let's say, for example, that you're studying biology and learning about jellyfish, right? Probably the other person that you meet and fall in love with and marry and want to start a family with is somebody who also studies biology, who also studies jellyfish. Because after all, when you're in graduate school, that's your life. You're going to spend 40, 60, 80 hours a week just doing your graduate school stuff. The problem is, once you graduate and you have your PhD in biology studying jellyfish, you guys need to look for jobs. And you might guess that when you go looking for jobs, there aren't a lot of jobs for people who study jellyfish. especially at the same institution. If you're lucky, there will be one institution that you really want to go to where they're hiring somebody who studies jellyfish. And so you guys apply across the country, in essence, competing for jobs. And what happens a lot of times is that one of you will lock down the position you really wanted, a position at Stanford University studying jellyfish, while the other one doesn't get that job. Maybe they get accepted for a teaching position at the #1 college in the country, a place like Santa Fe, making a fraction of the money that the other one does, and without the research prospects. Now, I mean, there are a lot of us here who love teaching. That's why I work here. But there are a lot of people who'd much rather study stuff like jellyfish than teach at a community college. They'd much rather work at a place with national and international prestige, like Stanford University. So what do? Does one of you sacrifice your dream and you end up staying in Gainesville to work at Santa Fe? Or do you both move across the country to Stanford, one of you giving up the job and showing up with no prospects? What a place like Stanford will often try to do in order to entice the person that they really want to come is they'll say, well, we don't have enough money and enough space and enough positions for you both to be high-level, well-renowned, highly respected jellyfish researchers. We do have space for one of you to do that, and the other one to have a position as a trailing spouse. Now, you won't be a professor. You'll be a senior lecturer. One of you gets the corner office, high up in a fancy new building with a huge laboratory and a massive budget where you don't have to teach. You buy out of teaching, all of that grading and office hours and emails. You don't have to deal with any of that because you've got all these grant dollars coming in. Where the other one of you, well, we've got a position, so you can feel good, but that job's going to involve teaching 6 classes, each of which has 300 students and plenty of grading and emails. And you're going to get an office in the basement, a little windowless office in the basement. And you're not going to be invited to come to the meetings that other professors have or be able to make any decisions tied to departmental policy or mentor any students or do any of the stuff that you originally entered graduate school to do. But you'll have a job and you can teach, and that's it. This is kind of a tough position to be in, right? Because especially if you are the trailing spouse, it means that if you want to be a good spouse, if you want to be a supportive partner, you know what you need to do. You need to support your partner getting the dream position that they've always wanted. But it means that not only are you giving up on your dream, but every time you go to work, you carpool with your spouse, and you walk to 2 different buildings and 2 different offices. Every time you come home and talk about your day, every time you don't go to the same meetings they go to, you're forced to make this upward social comparison. You're forced to contend with the fact that on the deepest, most relevant personal level, you are comparing yourself with someone who does better than you, who you're close to, about something that you've never cared about more in your life, something that you sacrificed more than a decade of your life to study, that you're tens of thousands of dollars in debt just so that you could train yourself to be an expert in this thing. This is the definition of a valid, relevant, upward social comparison that's going to ding your self-esteem constantly. So, either you enter this state of horrible, deep depression because your self-esteem has been dinged so poorly, or you need to invalidate one of those 3 things. Somebody does better than you at something you care about, and they're close to you. One of the big things a lot of people do in a state like this is what you see whenever people do poorly at something. You go to the Olympics and fail. You enter the Battle of the Bands and fail. You go out for a job and you don't get it. You hit on somebody that you've had a crush on forever and they're not interested in you. What do most people do? They say, well, it's for the best. I didn't really want it anyway. There's something else that I care about. I've developed a new hobby. You know what? It's not all about this school stuff. That's what I thought I wanted to do, but ultimately I hate it. You know what? I'm coaching a softball team. I'm giving back to my community, and that's what really matters. It turns out, you know what? I actually love teaching a lot more than I loved research. In that case, what I'm doing is I'm removing that second thing. I don't care about this thing anymore, and I can support my spouse without any trouble because honestly, I didn't want to do what they wanted to do in the first place. This kind of social creativity, we often dismiss as people lying to themselves, but they're not. They're doing what they have to do in order to salvage that self-esteem and happiness. We're going to learn in a couple of weeks about synthetic happiness and about how this happiness is exactly the same as the natural happiness that we all seek. A second thing we might do, and this is something that we see a lot, is that we might have a hard time divorcing ourselves from the area where we want to be successful, but we don't have a hard time divorcing ourselves literally from our spouses. The trailing spouse program, as much as this is a policy that is meant to support people, ends up tearing apart relationships. Because what are you going to do when you have to compare yourself, face the fact that you are a failure every single day of your life? Well, you can walk away from the relationship and end up seeking a new career and new opportunities elsewhere. Just personally, I saw the disillusion of many relationships in higher education because of the trailing spouse policy. The last, and I mean, this is the most delicious choice that we can make, is to end up not having to make these upward social comparisons at all because the other person doesn't have to do better than us. If you're an optimist, you might say this is because you're going to work really, really hard and do way better, but that's going to take a ton of time and effort, and there aren't lots of opportunities for it. So what can you do? You can sabotage. Sometimes this is like cheating, that I'll find a way to cheat or grief or just be kind of a pain in the ass when playing video games against my brother in order to make sure he doesn't do particularly well. But even in a professional realm, you might find ways to do things like because you're upset and feeling pissy, you're not supportive of your spouse, that you make it hard for them to do their jobs, to show up on time. You accidentally, because you're thrashing around in a pissy, ragey kind of mood, you end up knocking their laptop with all of their research off of the counter and it breaks and they can't do their jobs. You get invited to the office holiday party and you show up surrounded by all these people who think they're so much better than you, and you get totally plastered, totally drunk, pinch one too many butts, and you're both fired, right? And that kind of sabotage can, in a way, feel like it solves the problem. So to summarize all of this, the self-evaluation maintenance model is a great illustration of how we are all really pretty terrible, just like I talked about at the beginning of the semester. That as much as you want to be a great spouse or partner and support the person that you're close to, in the end, saving your self-esteem is just as important, if not more important than other things. We get our sense of self-esteem, our sense of self-worth by comparing ourselves to others, meaning those upward and downward social comparisons. We love making those downward social comparisons, and upward social comparisons, we will do everything we can to avoid them. We make upward social comparisons and they hit our self-esteem when we are forced to make comparisons to people who do better than us at things that we care about, and we're close to them in terms of skill, in terms of proximity, in terms of relationships. So, the takeaway message here: find somebody similar to you in order to establish a relationship, whether it's a close relationship, a roommate relationship, a friendship, or even a romantic relationship, but not too close. Definitely not in things that you want to be really good at. In the meantime, remember that you guys have a lot of stuff coming up in terms of researching yourselves, in terms of studying for this upcoming test. So if you have any questions, reach out to me during office hours, send me messages, and otherwise, I will look forward to seeing you guys on Canvas, and do everything you can to make those downward social comparisons, preserve your sense of self-worth, and if you can, be supportive of those around you. I'm your professor, Ryan Keith, and I'll look forward to seeing you on Canvas.